And here is the revised rough color sketch. It's still not a finished painting, but I wanted to make some needed changes to the composition and to show you what those changes are that improves the composition. For one thing, I added more space down here, and also I added these bushes over on the left and on the right. These bushes help to add depth by overlapping the spaceship. As you can see, these bushes go up like that and they overlap the spaceship, and they're also pointing in this direction toward the center of interest, which is this figure. And it also adds weight to the lower left corner as well as over here to the right lower corner, and helps to keep the eye within the picture by preventing the eye from leaving at the corners. I also reduced the tree line that was back here, and let me show you the previous version. You see the tree line is up here. I reduced that line, and now there is this rhythmic line coming down to the figure like that and around like that. There's a structure, an underlying structure here. It's like this. If you're familiar with my videos on the underlying structure, you'll understand why this is being done. I can't go into it here. You have to study the videos on the hidden structure or the hidden geometry. So this is just a rough division of the pictorial space that forms this particular structure, and there's another horizontal line going across like that. Now there's somewhat more to this structure. This line continues around like that, creating that circular shape. Then there's a line here. These are the major divisions of the pictorial space. And then there's this shape here, the triangle shape. So this is the hidden structure, the underlying structure. And then there's a circle there that repeats this larger circle here. And also I want to point out to you the implied directions within this composition. If you studied my videos on design and composition, you will have learned what implied directions are. So I'm analyzing the composition now, but you can also see that there have been some changes made to the color. So here's the previous color, and the green here is a bit too saturated, so I reduced the intensity of the green, and you can see that right there, and repeated some of the color that you see on this machine in the sky. You see the violet touches of color in the sky, and also on the spacecraft there are parts where that color has been repeated. By reducing the intensity of the color in the sky, as well as the intensity of all of the colors surrounding this section of the painting, makes that section and its color appear even more brilliant. When you place more saturated colors against desaturated colors, those more saturated colors appear even more saturated, more brilliant, even brighter, because of that contrast in intensity or saturation of colors. The implied directions, or as they're also referred to sometimes as compositional pointers. You see these bushes that I pointed out to you earlier, they are pointing in the direction of where the figure is, so they set up an implied direction, but the implied directions can also be seen here on the spacecraft. You'll notice that these lines here in the spacecraft, they lead in the direction of where the figure is, leading over toward the right where the figure is located. Various forms of the Marin color triangle are part of this rough color sketch. For example, tone. Tone is found everywhere in this rough color sketch. I've created varying degrees of grade colors. Remember, I showed you how to mix grade colors that result in tones. And that's what was done for this rough color sketch. Also, tints have been used, which are one of the 7 forms of color on the Berlin color triangle, as you know. So tints have been used here, where the light is, and on the figure, and even here. Color, of course, has been used throughout. Some colors are more pure, others more grade. Black I left out. I didn't use black. Shade was used where the darker parts of the picture are considered shade. And even here. I didn't use any neutral gray. That I left out. And I did use small accents of white that you see here and here on the figure, and then also on the highlights and up here. Very small white. Actually, some are off-white. That means almost white, but not quite. Now I want to mention a word about why I added more space down here. If you look at the old version, you can see that there's much less space. I needed to add additional space in order for there to be more of this warm color pattern. A larger size consisting of the warmer colors compared to the size of the cooler colors, which are these. In the previous version, the sizes of the two areas, the cool and the warm, were too similar in size. One needs to be larger in size than the other, either the warmer color pattern or the cooler color pattern. Now, if you're not familiar with color patterns, then you might want to check out my video on color patterns. Also, this idea of there being this relationship of 1/3, let me get back to the other version, 1/3 is taken up by the cooler colors, and then 2/3 of the pictorial space is taken up by the warmer colors. So there is this size relationship that is established. 1/3 against 2/3. One size is smaller than the other. This is an important concept in composition. It not only pertains to color, but also to values. It's important that you establish this 1/3 and 2/3 sizes. And I'll make it even more clear by doing a rough diagram sketch here. Let's say I'll start out with this black to create a border here, and then divide the pictorial space into thirds like this, so that this becomes your 1/3 size. And let me make that a green, since I have a smaller area in my rough color sketch consisting of the cooler colors, and green is one of those colors. So I'll add that over here. And then the rest of the composition consists of 2/3. And I'll add the warmer colors that I used for the 2/3 in my rough color sketches over here like this. So you can see this relationship of sizes of 1/3 and 2/3. 1/3 cooler colors, 2/3 warmer colors. Now, if you're familiar with color patterns that I teach in my videos, you'll know that The warmer pattern consists of many different colors, such as I have in my rough color sketch, and there can even be some cooler ones within the warm pattern, and then there can be various cool colors, of course, within the cool pattern. So here I'm adding some red violet and some violet, and then of course you can have some warm color within the cool pattern. I should mention that this 1/3 to 2/3 relationship of sizes doesn't just pertain to color patterns, but also to value patterns as well. And what I'll do is I'll add a gray over here that represents the dark values, and then I'll add a lighter gray to the 2/3 part. So I have 1/3 dark values and 2/3 of light values. So there's a light value group and a dark value group, which means that the dark values or dark value group consists of varying degrees of dark values, some a bit darker, some a bit lighter, like I'm indicating here, and they form a group of dark values, like that. And then you have a group of lighter values, some lighter, some a bit darker, and they form this group of lighter values. Now I get into this much more in my other videos on value patterns. Let me point something out to you. For example, if I have a dark group like this, some values a little lighter, some a little darker, and they form a dark group of values. Then there are the middle values, like this. Neither dark nor light, but they fall between the darks and the lights. Then there are the lighter values, like this. So you have 3 groups of values, each group consisting of more than just one value, 2 or 3 values that are different. And there can even be more, but the differences need to be slight, otherwise those dark values will then no longer belong to the dark group if you make them too light. And same goes for the middle value group. They need to relate to the middle values, and the same for the light value group as well. Don't make them too dark, or the values will then no longer be part of the light group of values. Now, I mentioned that there are the middle values, which are these. They're part of a value pattern. These middle values, however, should relate either more closely to the dark group of values or more closely to the light group of values, rather than falling exactly halfway between the dark and the light, which would look like this, for example. Here's the dark group, and I'm just representing it by one value. And then I have the light group on this side here, and then the middle value, which falls halfway between the dark and the light. The middle value that you see here needs to be made either lighter or darker, so that it either is closer to the darker value group or closer to the lighter value group. If I darken that middle value like this, for example, it still is a middle value, but it's a darker middle value, and because it is a darker middle value, it is now closer to the dark group of values than it is to the light group of values. If I made this middle value lighter, something like this, lighter than it was before, now that middle value is closer to the light group of values rather than to the dark group of values. And therefore, that middle value now belongs to the lighter group of values. And it is considered as part of the lighter group of values, therefore. So I can have middle values, but those middle values need to be either closer to the dark values or the light group of values. I'm getting away from color, but the reason for that is because you need to have good value relationships in order to have good color. If you have bad value relationships, your color is not going to look good. And values also pertain to the Barim color triangle. If you remember, I pointed out to you the value scale that consists of varying degrees of tone or different values. So now, if I add middle values to this diagram here, let's say I darken this middle value over here again, so that it is closer to the dark instead of the light value, I can then add that to my dark pattern here, like this. Make it a little bit lighter. So it still is now considered as part of the dark pattern. Even though it's lighter in value, it still is a middle value. It still isn't as dark as these other darker values that you see here. It's lighter, but it's closer to these darker values than it is to these lighter values, and therefore is considered as part of the darker pattern rather than the light value pattern. So let's say I do a little rough sketch here. Let me just make some changes. So there's some trees, let's say just very rough. And they're dark, as you can see. Dark values. And then I add a middle value, sky, like this. Make them larger in size, these trees. Now the sky is closer in value to the dark trees than it is to the light ground here. And therefore, all of this can be considered the dark pattern, and then I can add some lighter, or rather darker values here to this lighter ground area, and this then becomes my light pattern. And so I divide the pictorial space into roughly 1/3 to 2/3. Now this is a good rule, but of course rules can be broken. But if you're going to break the rule, then make sure you have a good reason. This kind of relationship of sizes works very well. So you have a dominant size of darks and then a subordinate size of lighter values. You always need this dominance of either the light or the dark. Dominance is a very important design principle that I talk about in my videos on design and composition, and it needs to be applied. It cannot be neglected. You need to understand dominance and its importance. Otherwise, you'll never be able to produce anything that's going to really capture the attention of people. Now, if you look over here again, where the middle values are, I'm going to make them darker, like that. And you can see that they now are closer in value to the darks up here. However, if I make them lighter, like that, now they're closer to the lighter values over here. So they become part of the lighter value pattern, or lighter group of values. But if you have the middle values like this, where they are not close to either the light group of values or the dark group of values, then the middle values, they lie in the center, relating to neither the light or the dark group of values. And because of that, the middle values therefore then do not become part of either the dark group or the light group. They are then separate from either of these other groups of values. I'm going to turn this little rough sketch into a color sketch, and I'll add green for the trees like this. Just one green over all these trees, and then I'll add a blue to the sky. And maybe a blue-green might work better. Like that. And to the ground, I'll add, let's say, a yellow-orange. And then add a little bit more yellow to the yellow-orange. Lighten the value. So here I have my 1/3, 2/3 size relationships in terms of color, where 2/3 of the little sketch is taken up by the cool colors, like this, and then about 1/3 with the warmer colors. That's not precisely 1/3 and 2/3, roughly. It doesn't have to be so precise that you have to take out a ruler and start measuring. You don't do that. As long as you get an approximate size relationship of 1/3 to 2/3, where the 2/3 dominate in size, where you have either the darker or lighter values or the warmer or cooler colors, and then the 1/3 where you have warmer colors or lighter values or darker values, and then 2/3 lighter values. Another thing I want to point out to you is that you have, as I mentioned, the 3 basic values that make up your value pattern: dark, middle, and light. So here they are. But what I also need to point out to you is that while you have this relationship of 1/3 to 2/3 size, let's say there is the dark at the bottom, the dark values, a group of dark values, and then you have the middle values, which are closer, in this case, let's say, to the dark values. Each size, however, needs to be different in size. See, this representing the light values is the 2/3, which is much larger than the 1/3. But when you look at the 1/3 here, you see that the 1/3 consists of 2 different sizes. There's the smaller size consisting of the middle values, and then you have the larger size consisting of the dark values. So each size here is of a different size. And this variety of sizes adds interest to your compositions. So it's important that these values have different sizes. Each group of values should have different sizes, different areas that are of a different size. to get that variety of sizes in there to make your compositions more interesting. But you can see that the combination of the middle values and the dark values take up about 1/3 of the entire picture space. So the 1/3 is a combination of the middle values and the darks. Now it can be reversed, of course, where the 2/3 is taken up by the dark group of values, and then I have the light group of values that take up the least amount of space, and then I have my middle values here that are closer to the light group of values than to the dark group of values. So the 1/3 space in this case is taken up by both the middle values and the light values, while the 2/3 is taken up by the dark value group. So I can add some lighter values in here just to represent a number of different values within the dark value group. So they're all basically darker than the values in the 1/3 part of the pictorial space. And because of that, they're considered as part of the dark value group. Now, if you look over here, I'm going to make a change. I'll change the sky to a really dark value, say a real dark blue-green. So all of this up here is the dark value group, and then down here I'll add middle values, like this. And then I need to add the lighter value group. And lighter than that. Something like this. Now you can see that the middle values here are closer to these light values than they are to the dark values up here. Therefore, the middle values belong to the light value group, to the 1/3 area, rather than to the 2/3 area. And you can see that it's similar to what I established here, these different sizes. Time to return back to the color sketch, and I made some additional changes. You might notice what they are. I added this light value here, and I made the light value that you see here even lighter, so that a stronger value contrast exists between these light values and the surrounding darker ones. And these light values, as I've indicated here, are linked together to form this shape. It's an interesting looking shape. Your shapes for your value patterns, your value pattern shapes, in other words, should be interesting shapes. When you make a shape like this, that is the result of linking together similar valued shapes, and you have one shape like this, it's important that you also create a diversion for the viewer's eye, so that he isn't or she isn't focused just on this light value shape. The eye needs to travel to other parts of the picture. Therefore, what I could do in this case is maybe add a light value shape here and make this skull lighter in value, and maybe some additional smaller valued shapes, light valued shapes somewhere else as well. And now, and maybe over here, and now these smaller additional detached lighter shapes act as divergence. They divert the eye from just focusing on this light value shape, so that the eye is now also attracted here and here and here. So it's now traveling around the picture, around the composition, in other words. It's looking at other parts. It's encouraged to look at other parts because the eye is attracted to these other light value shapes as well, not just to this one. So I'm going to add those lighter valued shapes now. So some light is falling on the top part of the spaceship, like this. And then maybe some small lights occur right around here. And then the skull over here could have some more light falling on it, thereby making that value of the skull lighter, like that. And just have to work on these lights over here. And I'll also add some light values here. So something like this. I also feel the need for a light shape over here. So maybe some of that light that's falling on the figure and other parts of the picture is falling on some grass over here. And now I have these lighter spots in various places that help to divert the attention away from this larger light shape and keep it from setting up too much of a bullseye, so that you only focus on that part and you don't move to other parts of the picture. Here's what it looks like in grayscale. And back again. This little rough color sketch doesn't quite have the 1/3 to 2/3 proportions that I talked about earlier. It's more like what I'm going to indicate now. So first I'll just add this middle value over the entire picture area like this. And then I'll add a darker value that represents about how much of the very dark values there are in the picture. And now I'll add the size of the light values. And they only take up maybe about this much of the entire picture. So you don't have that 1/3 to 2/3 proportion. But nevertheless, even though I broke that rule, I still have different amounts of these different values that helps to add interest through variety. So I have more of this mid-tone, and if you look at my rough sketch, you can see that there's a lot of mid-tone. All of this is mid-tone, and back here, all of that is mid-tone. Then there are the very dark values, which are these. And the middle values are closer in value to the very dark values than they are to the very light values. And you can see that in my diagram here, that this middle value is closer to this dark value than it is to the light value here. And therefore, the middle values belong to the dark value pattern, or to the dark value group. There's the middle value group, and there's the dark value group. And since the middle values are closer to the dark value group, they are seen as part of the dark value group. But then you have the light value group that I pointed out to you right there. And they have different values. There are different light values and dark values within the light value group. But the amount of the light values is far less than the amount of the midtones or middle values. They take up a small area compared to the darks and especially the middle values. So I broke that rule of 1/3 to 2/3, but yet the composition is effective. You don't always have to adhere to that 1/3, 2/3 rule, although it is a good rule to follow to get good compositions. You can, on certain occasions, break that rule for certain effects that you want to create. And I wanted a smaller area of light like this to get that certain mood that I was after. Now let's say I want to increase the light value group in size so that there is that 1/3 to 2/3 proportions. So something like this, where I now have the light value group taking up about 1/3 of the picture area. And then I have some different light values within that light value group. It's not made up of just one value. The 1/3 size is just approximate. Don't start using a ruler and measuring to see if it is exactly 1/3 of the picture area. It's roughly that. You're just working by whether it looks approximately 1/3 of the picture area. You're not using a ruler to measure and get exact proportions. Now, if you look at my rough sketch here, I'm going to lighten the sky like this. And now, this rough sketch is closer to the 1/3 size proportion in which the light value group exists. I lightened the sky a little bit more, but now I no longer have that same mood that I had before when the sky was darker. That's why I didn't use the 1/3 to 2/3 proportions for this particular picture, and I broke that rule so that I could get the correct mood that I had in mind, which, when I darken the sky, looks like this. See, there's a more mysterious feeling to the picture now than when I lighten the sky like that. So the 1/3 to 2/3 rule isn't always followed, but usually it is. So if you're going to break the rule, have a good reason for it. Like in my case, because I wanted a particular, more mysterious mood, I broke that rule. So you can still wind up with a very interesting and effective painting, even though you broke that rule. But the question is, why? And the answer to that is because when you create different sized areas, like in this example now, where I return to the smaller size light value group here, you can see that there are different sizes. There's a dominant size of the middle values, and then a smaller size of the very dark values, and then an even smaller size of the very light values. So for each value group, there are different sizes. There are different proportions. And this difference in sizes creates variety. And it is this variety of sizes that adds a tremendous amount of interest to a picture. the composition can still be very effective even though you're not using the 1/3 to 2/3 proportions. As long as you get that variety of sizes in which one is dominant, and then you have a subdominant which is smaller, and then you have a very small size. So there are these three sizes. Now I'm going to bring in another rough color sketch that I did, in which I roughly use the 1/3 to 2/3 proportions. And there it is. Now I'll turn it into a grayscale, and you can see that the middle values, which are these, and these here, here, you see the middle values. Those middle values are closer in value to these darks that you see here than they are to the lighter values, which are here and here. Therefore, those middle values belong to the dark value group, and therefore all of this can be considered the dark value group, with this part being the light value group. And then there are some spots of light values here and there to help move the eye through the composition, like I showed you in the previous rough color sketch. You can see that this lighter part takes up roughly about 1/3 of the picture area. Remember, it's roughly. You don't take out the ruler and start measuring. Now, I could even lighten the light value group some more to increase the dramatic appearance. Strong value contrasts add drama to a picture like this. And I think that works even better than before when the values were a little darker. A diagram like this can be simplified even more. So instead of showing three value groups, the middle, the dark, and the light, you can simplify it so that you only see the dark and the light group. Since the middle value group is closer to the dark value group and considered part of the dark value group, or the dark value group is considered part of the middle value group, you can group them together and just have one dark value that represents those two value groups, the middle value group and the dark value group, which take up 2/3 of the space, and then the other 1/3 of the pictorial space, you have just the light value group represented by just one light value like this. So you have this proportion of 1/3 to 2/3. So this is a way of simplifying the value groups, but it's probably better to show the amount of the middle value groups in relation to the dark value groups and to the light value groups, so that you get different proportions. So each value group has a different proportion, a different size, takes up a different amount of area than another value group. And you can see that better when you break it down into 3 value groups instead of 2 like this. This is a way of simplifying the value groups. That value group that takes up the greater area dominates in size over the other value group that takes up a lesser amount of area. And it is that 2/3 value group that establishes the mood of the picture. So if most of the picture is dark, then the mood is going to be different than a mood in which 2/3 of the picture consists of the light value group. So it's very important as to which value group dominates. That will determine what the mood of the picture will be. So keep that in mind when you're planning your compositions. Let's consider a painting where the darks and lights are dispersed through the entire composition. What I'm going to do is lighten this sketch here, and then I'm going to place some darks and lights scattered or dispersed throughout the picture area like you see here. What needs to be done in a case like this is the whites, near whites, and their neighboring middle values need to be added up to see if they amount to 1/3 or 2/3 of the picture area. And the same goes for the darks and the middle values. When they are added up, do they take up 1/3 or 2/3 of the pictorial space? Remember, you have to think about whether the middle values, in this case, these values are the middle values, whether they are closer to the lighter value group or the darker value group. What I'm going to do is darken the middle values here somewhat so that they are closer to the dark value group. So you add up the middle values and the dark values all together like this to see if they take up 2/3 or 1/3 of the pictorial space. And you do the same for the light value group. You add them up, and you can see that there are some darker values within the light value group, and then there are lighter values. There are different light values within the light value group. So you add up all of these light values to see that when added up, if they fall into the 1/3 or 2/3 value group. And now I'm going to return back to the color sketch. And I think this is where I end the video. I hope you've learned some things and that you will apply them to your paintings.